Public Sector Network is a social learning platform designed to help government executives to network, benchmark, and establish best practice. As a registered B Corp, we balance purpose with profit and maintain the highest standards possible for our customers, community, workers, governance, and environment. Our audience spans across 10 distinct communities of practice, showcasing the latest and greatest thinking from these sectors, from both your peers and potential partners. We freely democratize the information available and ensure our members can access it both online and in person to best suit their preferred learning style. Public Sector Network continues to grow our services, remaining committed to our mission of being the #1 trusted resource for government looking to move from good to great. Sign up and see what you can learn from your Public Sector Network.
Hello ladies and gentlemen. Before we begin proceedings, I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay my respect to their elders both past, present and emerging. My name is Emil Steinberg. I'm Director of Customer at Public Sector Network, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar, which is going to be focusing on consolidating digital platforms to drive CX, which we've organized in partnership with Squiz. A quick reminder that you're welcome to submit any questions throughout the webinar using the group chat box, and I'm sure our speakers will be delighted to answer them for you. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to your speakers for today. We have Stephen Wernicke, Digital Program Manager at Queensland Health, and he'll be joined by RaeJean Pearce, Global Head of Government at Squiz. RaeJean, over to you to kick things off, please.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you're having a great day. So let's walk on to the first. Can we go to the first slide, which is the next one online? So let's think about your morning commute this morning. For those of you who take the bus or the train, or for those of you who are in locations where perhaps you can't quite commute to the office right now, think about the last time you were on that train or that bus. How many people on the train or the bus were on their phones? Probably the majority of the people. They were doing social media, checking Instagram, checking Facebook, or perhaps they were catching up on the latest news story, what's going on. They could have been catching up on sports, looking who's playing in the game tonight, or dare I say it, even placing a bet. Or some of them are jumping straight into their work emails, checking what's going on in the office before they get there. But I would assume that not many of those people on that train that morning were actually on a government website. How many people will go to a government website just to browse? Next slide. The answer to that question is actually not very many. Most people, constituents, know that if they're going to have to phone into a government office, they're likely to be on hold for a very long time. So they would much rather visit your website to pay their utility bill, apply for a building permit, service request, or to even report a hazard that's going on in the neighborhood. Or they may go to your website for very specific information that's useful, timely, and very importantly up to date. And no more have we seen that in the last year with COVID. How many times people have gone to a government website to find out how many cases have been reported, or what's the current status in terms of lockdowns, or if you live in Western Australia like I do, which borders are closed and when are we actually going to be able to escape the state. Or more recently, where's the local vaccines? What are the rules around vaccination? So they're mainly going to there for a very specific reason. And studies show over and over again, today's standards are that a government website needs to maximize its citizens' time. They want to get in, they want to get it done, and they want to get out again. Next slide. So governments struggle to achieve the balance between delivering really efficient digital services to their citizens and managing the scale of consolidating on their websites. So in today's world, I think there are over 2 billion websites that are currently active. Probably actually 400 million of these are actually active and being used. When you look at the breakdown of those websites, a lot of these websites actually belong to various levels of government at the federal, state, and local levels. So over the course of how many years we spin up more and more websites. You know, COVID has come, let's spin up a website for this. The rules have changed regarding this, let's spin up another website. And COVID has actually just accelerated the amount of websites we're creating, because we've gone probably 7 years in advance of our digital offering, because of all the lockdowns and because of the interactions, more and more websites have gone up. And a lot of these websites are actually just a copy of what we used to do offline that we picked up and put online. So how do we actually get a more successful approach? So successful government websites are consistent, accessible, and current. How do we consolidate all that information into a single place for the citizens? Next slide. So with this in mind, I think that the government today has a massive opportunity to actually really think about how we're serving our citizens. And you would be really surprised, and maybe not because you're in customer experience, how many government websites actually miss the most important goal, which is to serve the public well. You know, a lot of the websites that we do are designed about the way that we work internally within government, as opposed to the way that citizens want to interact with government. So again, we have this amazing opportunity right now to take that and figure out how can we consolidate all of our websites to bring a single approach to the citizens. Next slide. So the consolidation of websites, or at least the perceived consolidation, and I think that's important, because the tools and the technology we have today that says that we don't necessarily have to change the back end of what we're doing to actually provide a united front to the citizens at the front. So we don't necessarily have to consolidate every website. We just need to give that perception that they are giving a single experience to the website. Every community thinks they're unique, but from city to city, from state to state, to country to country, citizens tend to go to the websites for the same exact reasons, again, to get something done. Get in, get it done, and get out again. They don't want to have to understand who they're dealing with. They don't have to think about, am I getting a boating license today? So do I go to the Department of Transport, or do I go to the Department of Fisheries? They just want to be able to go onto a website and get done what they need to get done. They want it to be easy, and they want it to be efficient. I'm in the unfortunate situation right now of moving house and trying to do an address change at both the state and the federal level. So I can't go to one place and change my address. I have to go to multiple websites. And even through MyGov, which is a center for a lot of information at the federal level, I still have to individually branch off to each one of those websites to actually complete my address change. So again, it's not a seamless transaction. It's not an easy way for me to get on, get it done, and get off again. All right, next slide. Great. So what are the benefits? We talk about the benefits to the citizens about being able to consolidate these websites, but what is the benefit to government itself? And there's actually quite a few. We've been assisting a lot of governments in looking at and thinking about the return on investment in terms of the consolidation project. So in addition to be able to provide a more efficient service to your citizens, you're actually creating more efficiencies internally. You're able to decrease your costs. And how do you do that? You don't reinvent the wheel. So every time that we do need to provide more information or more websites or spin something up for our constituents, we have a template in place that allows us to do that in a very unified way. So we're not going back and redesigning everything from scratch, trying to decide what technology we're going to use, trying to decide how it's going to integrate, trying to decide how we're going to present to the clients, because it's all been done before and those templates are all in place to do that. So you're not reinventing the wheel. You have shared data and shared resources across the environment. So the shared data could be in the sense of maybe there's a single source of truth for my address. So I change it once and that populates to where it needs to go. Maybe it's shared data about understanding the personas of our citizens. What age category do they fall into, and how can we actually serve them better and provide more proactive engagement with those clients? And it's also about shared resources. It's shared hosting environment, shared technology, shared people. You know, the people who are actually able to design and develop the websites may work across multiple agencies. But most importantly, it's also a consistency of brand. When you think about, again, about our constituents, they're not worried about the flashiness of the website. They're not worried what color schemes used. Although I understand in Australia, it changes a lot between red and blue. What they are interested in is the ability to know that every field is going to be exactly where I think it is. So if I'm going to one agency versus another agency versus independent departments within a single agency, I'm going to know exactly how to use that form and exactly how to to navigate that website, and it's going to be efficient. It's not going to require me to take 5 or 6 different clicks to get to where I need to go to. I don't know if you're aware, search is one of the most important things on our websites today, and most people, 95% of people navigate a website through search, and I think it's like 80%, if that search criteria doesn't come up on the first page, they actually won't go to page 2. So it's about making sure that we can surface the information that our constituents need in a clear and concise way to provide them with the information you need and to provide more efficiencies internally as well. So I think that what we'll do right now is we're going to move on to our fireside chat with Stephen. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to do a brief introduction to what we're going to be talking about today. So if we can bring Stephen on into the conversation. So Stephen is the Digital Program Manager at Queensland Health, and Queensland has been embarking on Queensland Health, has been embarking on quite a significant consolidation and transformation process. So Stephen, welcome today.
Hi everybody. Hi RaeJean. Nice to be here.
No, great to have you again. So given that we only have a limited amount of time, I'm just going to jump straight into our fireside questions. Can we start at the very beginning? So why did Queensland Health decide to embark on this transformation process, and how did you begin the whole process?
Well, I've been on the project for about 2 years. It's probably a 4-year transformation, and that's generally how long something of this size will take. The process started, I suppose, many years ago, when the structure of Queensland Health changed somewhat. So each of the hospital and health services became its own statutory authority and was able to make decisions. And in that environment, whereby you had a centralized, I suppose, department web presence, in as much as we could, I suppose, we influenced other website properties within the site network. But as you go along and without appropriate and agreed governance, things can go what you call organic, and through nobody's individual fault, the system became fragmented to the point that it started presenting challenges to users. And so there was an audit done in 2018. In 2019, my team was stood up, and quite presciently, I think it was agreed that the transformation team would operate independently of the current state online team. And what that gave us the ability to do is remain future focused and really craft the project and program in such a way that we were quite or could be quite far-reaching in our vision. And so what we did is we took an evidence-led approach, and at the beginning we weren't exactly sure where the journey would lead us, and I think that's the only way you can address a large-scale project like this.
And it's quite a few websites, right?
Yeah, well, that's right. So you can imagine there's 16 hospital and health services. So each of them has multiple sites in general. Then there's the different divisions within the department. You've got all the different campaigns. You've got various other statutory authorities, bits and pieces, and the size of the organization is 100,000 people, and so that's almost like a population in itself. So a very broad range of stakeholders and user needs, and consequently a broad range of website properties. So there's over 100 of them. Yeah.
Wow, that's quite a big transformation process.
Yeah.
And I should mention to everyone, because normally Neil does the introduction, if you do have any questions, feel free to post them. I'm just going to start throwing questions at Stephen, but if anyone wants to add a question, feel free to post them on the site, and I'll try to get to them as best I can. So jumping back into, we always hear that old saying that most projects are 90% planning and 10% execution. So do you have any tips for anyone who's on the call today about how to start a consolidation process of this magnitude?
Yeah, I guess in my experience, there's 2 types of planning. There's good planning and bad planning. Bad planning is when you, particularly with a large largish sort of project. You can't start off at the beginning thinking you know everything. You can't design the endpoint, you can't design the solution and go in a beeline towards that. What happens in reality is that you need to understand the direction, as I said, go to where the evidence leads you, but do it in an iterative fashion. And so you want to build small iterations of deployable software. You want to put together a multidisciplinary team. And so my team, we've got 11 people in it. And so we've got, dedicated UX and design professionals. We've got programmers, we've got content specialists, and digital producers. And you've got to also ensure that the people making the decisions are the people involved in doing the work. So when you put all that together, what you've got is agile methodology. I don't think it would be possible to deliver a meaningful outcome using a waterfall approach with a project this size. So that's my first comment, I suppose, is that the planning has got to be done in an agile sense. And then when you drill down, so that's the sort of broad landscape, and then when you drill down into each property, you've got to go sort of deep again. You've got to do another round of stakeholder consultation with relation to that. And basically what we're doing is we're following the Digital Transformation Agency's service design and delivery model, and that incorporates in it elements of design thinking, agile methodology, and so on. And I'm really pleased that the state government of Queensland, through its customer and digital group, has got a new draft digital services policy that's in play at the moment, and that specifically references Digital Transformation Agency and their methodologies, which to some degree was inherited from the UK, and it just happens to be a really effective way to work. So we are a government department, and so the professionals who are used to delivering large-scale IT projects, probably mostly in a waterfall fashion, they recognize that there is a certain need to change elements of what they do. We're a little bit fortunate in that we sit within strategic communications, so we're outside of that main IT-heavy area, and that has given us a certain degree of latitude to engage as we see fit, and it just so happened that it has lined up nicely with the overall government direction.
Yeah, so it's an interesting point when you talk about all of Queensland, because I mean that was a question that we had the other day. Yeah. So what you're doing, even though your consolidation project is around Queensland Health, it's actually having a bigger impact on Queensland government as a whole. Yeah,
well, that's a good point, RaeJean. It's entirely selfish motives. Well, not entirely. There's some altruism there, but the last thing I wanted to do was build out a program that works, and all of a sudden have somebody come along and tell us we're doing it wrong, or we're doing the wrong thing, or it's inconsistent with this direction or that policy. So a key to this, which we'll probably get to a bit later, is the nature of stakeholder engagement. And it was really important with us to engage with the right people within Queensland government to be able to future-proof what we're doing. And it just so happened we're unbelievably lucky with the timing at the time that we figured out we needed to build out a design system. The state government, through the customer and digital group, recognized that they need a design system to replace the current state. And so that's been actually articulated in the digital services policy, that there's going to be continued collaboration between the work that Queensland Health is doing and the work that the state government is doing. And that collaboration is continuing, so I'm really pleased with how that's going.
Oh, that's great. So when I think about another thing that you picked up, and you talked about the number of people at Queensland Health and how many different websites that you have. And yeah, we all know when we've seen these consolidation programs, one of the biggest challenges we have is when people feel like things are being done to them. So there's a lot of stakeholders that are obviously going to be involved that manage these current websites. So how do you go about getting them on board and bringing them into the project and making sure that they're engaged throughout the process?
Yeah, that's we had like the digital transformation agency's delivery model is discovery, alpha, beta, deployment. And so what we did, of course, is engage upon quite a lengthy discovery process. With such a large number of stakeholders in such a diverse organization, it's really hard, actually, to figure out who to talk to. You've got to, over time, build up trust, I think. So I would like to say that trust is the coinage of our realm. Without it, you're just another person asking questions, and you've got to demonstrate that to the stakeholders by largely doing what you say you're going to do. So you've got to build up a culture within your team of being reliable and transparent and so on. So that is important, because over time, the cream rises to the top, and the people that you engage with trust you. They can refer you to other people. So it's quite a long process, which is understandable. You've got to set up the right, as part of our assurance process with the Assurance Office of eHealth, we were encouraged to set up various consultative groups. So we've got an advisory group which has representatives from across the organization, and indeed from across all of our audience groups. So those audience groups are, there's 5 of them. There's the public, there's patients and carers, there's staff, there's clinicians, and then there's industry. And so we like to in a structured way, once a month, get in front of all these people. We also got a steering committee, of course. We've got every fortnight this sprint ceremonies that we do, where we engage broadly with people, and various other mechanisms by which we engage. An example of that is we use the organization called Health Consumers Queensland. So they're set up specifically to engage with health consumers within Queensland, because it's part of the law that hospital and health services need to consult. And so we had a ready-made organization there who was able to help us to organize 18 what we call kitchen table sessions, where you get broad range of stakeholders from all sorts of audience groups, including culturally and linguistically diverse and First Nations clinicians as well. And we ran, like I said, 18 of those across 16 different regions all throughout Queensland. And that generated, together with the other consulting that we were doing, through surveys, through various questionnaires that would pop up on in a contextual sense on websites, just a massive amount of data. And one of the hardest things that I've found with this project is just knowing when to stop, because it's one of the things is you're swimming in data, and sometimes we were advised by some of the external people we use that enough is enough. There's law of diminishing returns. If you keep consulting, it's not going to be worth that expenditure of time and resources. So that's another challenge. And then as you go along, you've got to package that data up in such a way that's readily communicable. And that's something that I find in general with such a large project, is that sometimes you're going down a certain path, you've got a decision to make, and the correct choice is usually the one that's the easiest to communicate to people, because so much of this is getting people on board, understanding why you're doing what you're doing. And if it's a big, long, complicated explanation, it's not the easiest thing to do. So yeah, it's tough, and it takes a lot of work, and you got to know when to stop and actually engage in the next step of the process.
And I can imagine, because you talked about the 5 different user groups, and including clinicians and others. I mean, these are people whose background isn't necessarily on digital, so you would have experienced problems with a lot of digital literacy in terms of understanding Agile, understanding customer journeys, and I imagine
Yeah, absolutely. And believe it or not, RaeJean, website transformation is not top of mind for everybody. I think it should be. I think it should be the number one thing on everybody's mind. But apparently stakeholders out there, they've got their own lives to get on with. And, sometimes you try to engage with people and they're busy, or it takes time for them to get back to you, or you've got to work to find that one person, the one nerd in the business group who actually cares about what you're doing. And then they can sort of in turn sort of pass that enthusiasm on. So there are various and multiple challenges like that in dealing with stakeholders, because I'm sure the audience here is aware, and technical literacy is one of them. And you can't let that be a barrier, though, of course, because technical literacy within your broad audience group is quite often quite limited, and things that are obvious to you are not obvious to you or to your users. And so, one thing is if you've got trouble explaining it to a stakeholder within your organization, you're going to have Buckley's explaining it to, a certain subset of users out there in your audience.
So we do have an audience question related to what we're talking about right now. So do you normally use A/B testing approach to decide on which path to take?
Yeah, well, we haven't yet. So what we've done is we've delivered. We've been building stuff out since the start of this year. So we've delivered 4 websites so far, and in that situation, we have not yet, but we do have some A/B tests planned. As part of what we're doing, if you imagine, we're building out multiple website properties, but there's got to be a unifying umbrella of usability that holds everything together, because you don't want to have any wrong door in accessing your information. Because, as you said, RaeJean, search is paramount, and the fact is most people arrive at a page of content through Google. They, some of them, browse their way to it, but that's pretty small percentage, and so you've got to build out your umbrella, your global, what I call global components. So it's functionality that spans the entire system. And that would be, for example, Service Finder. It might be a media center where you could syndicate content amongst the different organizations. And with those particular components, it's going to be very important to do A/B testing. So we're planning some of that out as well. And also with capability uplift of, once we start deploying these things with the end users, we are going to train the distributed publishers how to conduct A/B testing themselves for when they're maintaining their own sites. And so that's something that we're very keen to educate our stakeholders on.
Yeah. So thinking about, and again, picking up on some of the comments you're making, obviously I would assume that Queensland Health thought about, the purpose of what they're doing this for and the success measures that they want to achieve towards the end. So how are you measuring the consolidation, and how are you communicating that success back to your stakeholders so they're seeing the benefit? Because if digital is not the top of mind, which I agree with you, I think digital consolidation and user experience should be top of mind for everyone. Absolutely. But how do you communicate back to the stakeholders the benefit of what they're getting?
Yeah, well, thanks. And once again, it needs to be done on 2 levels. So one is a program level, and so as part of the assurance process, what we're doing, the business case that's underlying this, we've got a benefits realization plan that's got a range of metrics. Some of them might be financial metrics, usability metrics, and so on. And we use something called the HEART framework as well. So you've got to figure out ways to measure, happiness, engagement, the others, adoption, retention, task success, and so that's done at a program level. And then once you get into each project as well, the key thing is you got to engage with your stakeholders. So let's say we're building out a set of websites for particular hospital and health service. The way we do that is through everybody that we deal with. So we treat ourselves like an internal agency, and so we've got a service agreement that stands and that we refer to in scopes of work. So before we commence engagement with the stakeholder, group, we identify a scope of work, who's responsible for what, and that's documented and put in Confluence. So we use Atlassian, Jira, and Confluence for a great deal of what we do, and it's very easy for us to point clients at that and keep them updated on that. So the scope of works as part of what you document there. There's benefits realization section of that. And so it's up to the particular client whether they want to create their own benefits realization plan. They've got their own, boxes that they have to tick. They've got their own budget sometimes, and we work with them to make sure that the budget is used in the very best way. And the strength of the design system is such that money that they otherwise would have spent on reinventing the wheel, we've already got the research documented. We've got the design system documented. And so we can work with them to make sure they get maximum benefit out of the finances they've got available, and then we just work with them to understand what the benefits that need to be delivered are. And so we want to avoid the nightmare situation of being sort of well past delivery, and then somebody comes along and says, well, what's the benefit? Like, why did you do this? And then you've got to sort of work backwards. It's much better to do the work in advance, and quite often it's pretty dry, but it's necessary to get documented.
And a great way to validate too, because it is government funding, and so you're actually, I'm sure, being held accountable for those.
Yeah, and the tools are so good these days too. Like we build out Google Analytics dashboards for each of the properties. There's great tools out there like Hotjar with heat mapping and Squiz matrix itself and Funnelback have got detailed reports. So there's no shortage of data. As usual, you're drowning in data, but you've got to crystallize the benefits early on.
Okay. So I'm loving this next question because you'll understand more when I read it out to you. So what CMS are you using, and are you designing out of the box, or do you have complex integrations and customizations?
Oh yeah, that's a really good question. So so out of the 16 hospital and health services, like I said, there's 16 of them. So there's the predominant CMS that's used within Queensland Government and within Queensland Health is Squiz Matrix. And we've found that it's fit for purpose, and that in the current instance of it, probably it's not exploited as well as it could be. So part of what we're all about is really getting the most out of the tools that are at our disposal, and it's actually really fun working with Squiz in a consultative way to make sure that we're working smart and we're working efficiently as well, and it's a real joy to have a sort of a greenfield space where we can set things up perfectly from the day dot. It was never an option for us to sort of re-engineer the existing instance, and so the model we're doing is we're keeping the existing platform going. We're building a new one off to one side, which is beautiful, and then using a live beta model, we'll decommission content on one, move it to the other, and eventually the old instance will sort of shrink away. And that's what the Federal Department of Health did as well. So out there in user land, there are other CMSs in use because, like I said, they made their independent decisions, and sometimes they crave control. So what we need to do is set things up in such a way that there's what we call freedom within boundaries. So they've got enough control, so they don't have to go off and do their own thing. They stay within the sort of walled garden. So there's Drupal, and there's WordPress, and there's all sorts of weird and wonderful CMSs out there. But once again, we've been working closely with the state government to make sure that what we're doing is consistent with what they're doing, because there are efficiencies to be gained. And so the last thing I want to do is make a poor decision on platform.
Yeah. So I'm gonna stick with audience questions because we have quite a few rolling through. So you mentioned how the traffic mostly are coming from the Google search. Do you have any advice on how to improve page positions in the search results?
Yeah, I guess not specific advice. It's such a detailed specialty. So it's a specialized. So I guess I'm not in a position to give, like technical considerations, but from a program management perspective, what we did is we broke that out as a separate exercise. So we built our thing, because the people that we got working on the project, and we worked together with certain Squiz developers. Like I said, we've got an external agency that we call upon, which is experienced design specialists, as well as my own people who were brought in specifically for this project. And they're no slouches. They're pretty good at what they do. So we did the sort of base level work, and then we retained a specialist SEO company to come in over the top, and just because I wanted to make sure, and we did the same with accessibility as well. So we had an external sort of third party come in over the top and audit what we did and what we're doing to make sure we're not making any sort of dumb mistakes. From what my guys are telling me, it's like a lot of consultants. They sort of tell you what you already know and charge you money for it. But there are little nuggets of wisdom that have come out of this process. And what we're really doing through this initial engagement is actually setting up a methodology to make sure that, so these people, this agency, they're the best in their field at what they do. And so we want to sort of embed that in our own work processes to make sure we get the very best SEO and marketing results. And then, if budget permits, I'll probably get them periodically to come in with each major release we do and do a sanity check over that sort of work. But it is a very specialized area.
Great. And we're having a couple different questions coming in around content authorship. Using distributed authorships. We're talking about data sets, engaging stakeholders to ensure that individual bodies still have the ability and flexibility to manage their own data and their own content. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about how you're addressing that.
Yeah, well, I guess the truth is, at the moment, we've been pretty heavily involved in the specific website properties that we've been deploying. As we go along and we get a greater amount of IP in terms of training material. So we had a Gate 4. Government's got this thing where you got to go through gates. We had a Gate 4 review done, and it was good. We came back amber, not green, and even though the project is set up really super well and everything, so the project itself is great, some of the governance around it needs tightening up, specifically in the area of transferring from a project situation over to sort of more of a BAU situation. And the center of that problem is exactly this, and that is how do you maintain control in a distributed environment? And it's a combination of governance, training, and having your own team set up in a way that we can help. And we've got to have the authority actually to be able to enforce certain standards. So I guess the short answer is we need to embrace distributed authorship. We need to create freedom within boundaries. And the way we've set it up as well is it's very important that you get enough flexibility in the situation so people just don't give up and go away. Because we've got no, as it stands now within Queensland Health, we've got no mandated authority to say you must do this to a lot of our stakeholders. The way that we get results is by building up something that's so great, it's irresistible. And in order to make it irresistible, users have got to be free to achieve their goals. Otherwise, they'll go off and build a WordPress site or something. And so part of that is the brand architecture that we've developed. And I talked before about things needing to be easy to explain. And one thing that's been unerringly easy to explain is the solar system model that we're approaching, whereby you've got the Queensland state government as the sun, the center of the solar system, and then there's 4 planets out. The first one being, so that's the master brand, then you got a sub-brand, and then you got a co-brand, then you got an endorsed and a standalone. And so the standalone at the farthest end of the spectrum has got design elements that are common across everything, because the whole point of this is to be able to create complex user journeys across multiple sites where the user will still feel at home and understand that they're within the Queensland health system. At some point, you don't always, there's a use case for it not being like super obvious. Then you've got other, because you might have a range of stakeholders in a particular property. So the flexibility offered by and so as you get further from the center of the solar system, then the rules that are enforced are less, but there's still rules. And so I guess an observation that we've found to be true is that you've got to allow sufficient flexibility to enable users to feel as though they can deliver what they need to for their set of stakeholders. And I think we're achieving that.
Yeah. I love the solar system design and what you've been able to achieve with that, because I mean it goes back a lot to addressing everything around consistency of brand, but also that flexibility and not reinventing the wheel that allows you to spin up things a lot quicker than you might otherwise be able to.
Yeah, that's right. And like I say, it's something that people instantly understand when you explain it to them. It's worked out really well.
I think someone might go have a couple of peeks at your websites, because the next question that came in is what Queensland Health websites have you launched so far?
Yep. So there's the one that I think this audience will find interesting is design-system.health.qld.gov.au. So that's the Queensland, that's our design system, and that itself is a work in progress. You'll see it's in beta, but by looking at that, you'll understand the elements of what we're doing, because it creates rules for content, for brand, for and design. So what we're building out at the moment is improved and more accessible Figma tools. So a lot of what we use in terms of design is Figma, and also a Git repository. So the whole point is, and this is going to be at the state government level as well, that's the plan, is that we can just point people at a bunch of stuff, and then everything is written down there. So that's one. Another little one we've done is Ice Help. I think it's just icehelp.qld.gov.au. Another one's Breast Green Queensland. And then the one that's in private beta at the moment, that's launching at the end of this month, or probably in the first week of July, is Cairns and Hinterland HHS. So if you find the Cairns and Hinterland HHS website right now, it's the current state. Ours will launch in early July, and then after that, we're focusing on certain elements of the department side itself, and we're building out. It'll be Darling Downs HHS, Sunshine Coast HHS, and a few others. Great.
And we're getting close to running out of time, so I'll apologize for all the questions that came through that I wasn't quite able to get to, because there has been quite a few that have run through. And just maybe as a wrap-up a question, do you have any challenges or any tips or any other thoughts that you want to give? I mean, it's great that you're telling me that everyone can go out and have a look at what you've done so far with the design. Sure. It's amazing and a great opportunity to reach out to you, perhaps.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I love hearing from people, and what I would say is, in terms of challenges or things that I'd like to impress upon people for what it's worth is to embrace, an agile methodology. I've seen projects run where even though they've got quite a bit of time before deliverable, they're really resistant to change. Whereas the mantra that I want to embed in my team is welcome change. Even last minute change is important, because it's generally because you've missed something, you've done something wrong. Users are telling you something, and so that's really only possible with an agile approach. And it's frustrating when you in other projects where you see something that needs to be done and it just can't be done. And then the other thing is that's very, very important, is to give UX an equal seat at the table as any other component of the project. Because some of these big IT projects, they've got a public-facing front end. They've got a lot of work that goes on underneath that the public never ever sees. And that is, and you can imagine security concerns, total respect for that. And so, nearly 100% of the effort goes in, under the waterline, and then it's almost an afterthought. It's like, oh, by the way, we've got to build a front end for this. And that'll, because the public, they only see the front end. And so you got to have UX at the table the whole way along. Otherwise, it's going to turn into a major problem. So that's another thing I'd like to mention.
Some great tips. It's been wonderful talking to you again, Stephen. I've been so excited to see where the journey that you guys have been on so far, and even more excited to see what direction it's going to take you in the future.
Thanks a lot, RaeJean. Yeah, I'm excited too. It's good.
Brilliant. I'll hand back to Anil. We'll wrap up.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for that, Stephen. Thank you so much for that, RaeJean. I actually just want to thank the audience for being so engaged and sharing so many questions. I know I've done a few of these, and it's always great when you get some audience questions. So, yeah, just want to thank everyone again, and hope everyone has a wonderful day. Take care.